So I wrote a book, came out a couple years ago, spent a couple years researching it, called Whole Earth Discipline, and it's sort of a green program for the 21st century. I wound up doing 2 chapters on cities, specifically mostly focused on squatter cities in the world, the slums where 1 billion people live and are getting the hell out of poverty just as fast as they can, and are really the salvation of the world because, among other things, the women are so busy and having so much fun they're not having children, and so the birth rate is plummeting. I think we saw something similar here in this slum, actually. So I wound up, as I wrote in this book, I had been studying and admiring the world's squatter communities for 2 years before I noticed that I live in one. Liberty ships, and now is the challenge to write in just a couple paragraphs the history of this enormous community. I've been here on and off since 1963. A lot has gone on, so the really short form. Liberty ships, the torpedo fodder of World War II, were built on Sausalito, California waterfront at a peak rate of 1 a day in 1944. When the war was over, the former shipyard became a semi-outlaw area and riffraff floated in. Steadily, throughout the 1950s and 1960s, the tidelands filled with floating shacks, derelict boats, habitable sculpture, occupied by artists, maritime artisans, and other people who had more nerve than money. Benevolent landlord went along with the game, collecting rent casually, protecting the community from outraged government authorities. Electricity was stolen from shore via extension cords, water by garden hoses. People crapped in the bay, and it smelled rank at a minus tide. There was some drug trade and the occasional murder. There was some freelance prostitution, hitch hookers they were called out on Ridgeway. There was also a fashion shop and a fashion show of recycled clothes, several rock bands, and a theater group, Antenna, that earned a world reputation. I've lived and worked in the scene since 1973. From time to time, the Coast Guard or the county sheriff would try to tow away the houseboats. The Sausalito City Council set a demolition crew on a dawn attack. A state agency created by environmentalists, the Bay Conservation and Development Commission, declared that houseboats are a legal bay fill and have been trying to expunge us for 35 years. The floating community hired lawyers, survived, grew, and gradually gentrified. The 400 or so Sausalito houseboats are mostly legal now, pay rent, berthage, and are hooked up to city infrastructure so the mud smells like mud again. Tourist groups stroll the docks to admire our colorful lifestyle. Chances are you've come across Sausalito waterfront creativity in the writings of Annie Lamott, Ellen Watts, Cyra McFadden, Paul Hawken, or Green architect Sam Van der Rijn, in the cartoons of Shel Silverstein or Phil Frank, in Otis Redding's Sittin On The Dock of the Bay, in the Antenna Theater-produced audio tours that guide you around the world's museums and historic sites, in the biological paintings of Isabella Kirkland, and in any town or city reshaped by what is called new urbanism. That last item is my example. In 1983, architect Peter Calthorpe gave up on San Francisco, where he had tried and failed to organize neighborhood communities, and moved to a houseboat on the end of South 40 Dock, where I live. He was out in what is now berth 20, that is, and the house he was in is what's at berth 18 now. It's been there since I remember when this was total scabrous weirdness in the early 70s, and that particular houseboat was built by a guy known as the Naked Guy, because all he wore was a tool belt. Winter and summer. Calthorpe found he was in a place that had the densest housing in California, where no one locked their doors, where most of the doors didn't even have locks. Without trying, it was an intense, proud community. When Calthorpe looked for some element of design magic that made it work, he decided it was the dock itself and the density. Everyone in the 49 houseboats on the dock passed each other on foot daily, trundling to and from the parking lot on shore. Everyone knew each other's faces and voices and cats. It was a community, Calthorpe decided, because it was walkable. Building on that insight, Calthorpe became one of the founders of New Urbanism, along with Andre Stuani, Elizabeth Platter-Zyberk, and others. In 1985, he introduced the concept of walkability in Cities Redefined, an article in the Whole Earth Review, which I edited. Since then, New Urbanism has become the dominant force in city planning, promoting high density, mixed use, walkability, mass transit, eclectic design, and regionalism. It drew one of its major ideas from the squatter community. Yay. Here it is.